I want to talk about something that people are still talking about. We'll get to the motions in just a little bit, but the makeup of this jury, it is a point of contention. We're talking about one black juror and 11 whites. But you have not just you, there's a theory for this, why it happened. There's only a certain amount of strikes that they actually have to use.
Right. In this case, there's a thing called peremptory strikes, and each side gets a number. And in this case, you have 3 defendants, so they got a much larger number than we typically see in a trial. They got 24 peremptory strikes that they can use, and you can use it for any reason as long as it's not discriminatory. In this case, the defense chose to use their strikes against 13 white people and 11 black people, and ultimately that was their 24. There were only 12 African Americans in that pool, so that knocked out the majority of the ones in the pool. This would have looked much different if we only had one defendant who only had a set number of strikes and we had more African Americans in the pool.
Right.
So it is interesting. You heard the arguments inside, the judge ultimately saying they had race-related reasons for those strikes.
Interesting, definitely disturbing to a lot of people, especially people in the area that you talk to. Let's get to the motions. We're going to go over just a few of them, some that have been discussed, because we know that both the state as well as defense, they have to understand what they can and can't say to these jurors. So that's what the judge ruled on, we know, on Thursday. One that was very interesting, a lot of tense moments, by the way, inside of the courtroom. One that was interesting was the THC level of Ahmaud Arbery at the time of this incident. So fill us in about that.
This was something that the state said, we don't want it to come in front of this jury. It's irrelevant. And the defense said it's something that they think goes to the theory of their case. They believe that it shows why Ahmaud Arbery acted a certain way while he was running and when he was confronted by Travis McMichael. So there were those arguments in court about that. The judge ultimately ruled that it is irrelevant and it is now excluded from coming in at this trial. So something that the defense can't bring up. There may be some ways around that once we get into trial when they call different experts or the medical examiner, but ultimately the judge agreeing that that is not relevant to this case.
This is something the defense was pushing for, being able to use a use of force expert. What happened ultimately with that?
Well, this is about these defendants. You have 2 of them, the McMichaels. One was a former police officer. Gregory McMichael had been a long-time law enforcement officer, and Travis McMichael was with the Coast Guard. So he had arrest powers at one point and a lot of training. So these defense attorneys wanted to bring in a use of force expert that we see in officer-involved shooting trials to say this is how they were trained, this is why they went after Ahmaud Arbery, and this is why they had the right to act in a certain way. The state says these were not officers, these were citizens, and if this is a citizen's arrest case, it should not come in. The judge ultimately did side with the state, and that also is excluded.
Okay, thanks for that, Julia. We're going to get into some of the other motions right now that have been decided on. Let's take a look at that.
So last night, the judge did rule he will allow body camera footage the defense said was too graphic. Prosecutors argued that the video is necessary because it shows what happens when someone shoots another person, and they don't want to hide anything from the jurors. We're also waiting to hear the results of 2 motions the judge is deliberating on. Those 2 motions include the state's motion asking to exclude that Arbery was on probation at the time of the shooting and evidence, and the defense's motion asking the court not to include a photo of Travis McMichael's truck that has a vanity plate of the old Georgia state flag. He said he would email the attorneys last night with the rulings. Now, coverage continues on firstcoastnews.com and the First Coast News app. We will continue to stream the entire trial, gavel to gavel.